I'm Ed Henry in for Brett Baer, and this is a Fox News alert. Breaking news on multiple fronts tonight. A massive recovery operation underway at this hour in the Java Sea, where officials are retrieving the bodies from the wreckage of Airasia Flight 8501 as the mystery remains over just why the plane plunged into the sea in the first place. That story just ahead. But first, moments ago in New York City, the police union chief came out swinging against embattled Democratic Mayor Bill de Blasio.
There were a number of discussions, especially about the safety issues that our members face. There was no resolve, and our thought here today is that actions speak louder than words, and time will tell.
This late-breaking development comes as a new report out today reveals that murders of police officers, like the assassinations we saw in New York, are on the rise across the nation. Correspondent Peter Ducey breaks down the sobering stats for us tonight.
The number one way police officers were killed by criminals in 2014, ambush attacks, resulting in 15 deaths compared to 5 in 2013, and contributing to a 56% spike in the number of officers killed by gunfire. In all, 126 law enforcement officers were killed on the job this year, an increase of 24%.
There are some weak-minded individuals in our society that have been influenced by the anti-cop, anti-government rhetoric, and they've gone out and they've targeted police officers.
Now in New York, amid safety concerns in the week and a half following the assassination of 2 police officers, there's been a dramatic 66% drop-off in arrests and a 94% decline in citations for minor crimes. These numbers were confirmed to Fox by the NYPD and first reported by the New York Post. This afternoon, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio met behind closed doors with key leaders from police unions.
Our main concern is the safety of our police officers of every rank on the streets of the city and the safety of the citizens that we proudly serve on each and every street in each and every neighborhood here today.
Relations remain frayed because de Blasio supported anti-police protests. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the country, similar problems. The release of Ezel Ford's autopsy inspiring demonstrations. Officers say they shot Ford, who was unarmed, when he tried to wrestle one of their guns away. And officials announced the autopsy backs up the officer's version of events. Still, a Ford family lawyer thinks the autopsy confirms the officers acted, quote, animalistic. And this comes just a day after officers narrowly avoided injury from rifle rounds fired at their LAPD vehicle. One suspect remains at large in that attack. On a day the nonprofit National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund is trying to bring attention to their fallen brethren.
The media has chosen to highlight the deaths of the civilians over the deaths of the police officers. Now, from one perspective is, well, police officers kind of sign up to put their lives on the line, which is why we refer to them as heroes.
And in the Big Apple, this is just the beginning, because police officials walked away from today's talk unconvinced that City Hall is really ready to improve safety measures to protect police. It sounds like they will need to see a change in the way that New York's finest are treated, and until then, we can expect to see a lot of tension.
Tough story. Thanks for bringing us all the details. Peter Ducey live for us in Washington.
Thanks, Ed.
Tension between police and the communities they serve has put a spotlight, of course, on American race relations. That's a subject President Obama waded into again in an interview with NPR, though his comments may be a little out of step with where the public is right now. Correspondent Dan Springer has that story tonight from Honolulu, where the president's on vacation.
When Barack Obama was elected 6 years ago, the first African-American president was hoped by many to be the healer-in-chief on race relations. Few could have imagined the rioting and protests around the country following the deaths of 2 black men at the hands of police. Just before leaving for his Hawaii vacation, Mr. Obama was asked by NPR if the country has actually gotten more racially divided under his watch.
No, I actually think that it's probably, in its day-to-day interactions, less racially divided, but I actually think that the issue has surfaced in a way that probably is healthy.
Yet recent polling paints a far bleaker picture. Majorities of blacks, whites, and Hispanics all said racial tensions have risen since Obama took office. A year into Obama's first term, a Fox News poll found 37% thought race relations were getting worse. Today, that view is shared by 62% of all Americans.
It's understandable that polls might say that race relations have gotten worse, because when it's in the news and you see something like Ferguson or the Garner case in New York, then it attracts attention.
Critics say President Obama has fostered mistrust between minorities and police. Former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani blasted Obama for hosting outspoken activist Al Sharpton at the White House more than 80 times.
You make Al Sharpton a close advisor, you're going to turn the police in America against you. You're going to tell the police in America, we don't understand you.
Eric Holder, the nation's first black attorney general, has launched investigations into several police departments for civil rights violations. In 2009, Holder said the U.S. was a nation of cowards when it comes to race. But now he's more optimistic.
We've made substantial progress as a nation. And if we don't admit that, we do a great disservice to people who sacrificed, who fought, who gave their lives so that I could be the first African-American Attorney General serving the first African-American president.
And the president's latest move on race, he's assembled a task force to examine relations between police and the people that they serve. The panel is charged with making recommendations to the president in March. Ed?
Dan Springer in a windy but still balmy Honolulu. Good to see you, Dan. Call it a tale of two congressmen. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal looks at how House Speaker John Boehner is dealing with two Republicans in hot water. One's gone, the other is trying to hang on.
Just as Speaker of the House John Boehner handles one problem with a GOP House member, another comes under attack.
I'm asking you to back up.
First, a change of heart by disgraced Congressman Michael Grimm, who last week said he was sorry but wouldn't quit after admitting to tax fraud in federal court. Now, after reported pressure from Republican leadership, he'll step down next Monday. His resignation statement reads in part, "The events which led to this day did not break my spirit, nor the will of the voters. However, it is time for me to start the next chapter of my life." Grimm was indicted earlier this year on 20 counts of misconduct in connection with a restaurant he co-owned before getting elected. He pleaded guilty to a single count of felony tax fraud and faces up to 3 years in prison when he's sentenced in June. He was popular with voters in New York's 11th congressional district, covering all of Staten Island and parts of Brooklyn, but may be best remembered for threatening a local reporter in the U.S. Capitol building.
Let me be clear to you. You have to do that to me again.
Speaker Boehner called Grimm's decision to step down honorable, and now he's weighing in on Republican whip Steve Scalise. The Louisiana congressman is facing harsh criticism after it was revealed he spoke to a white supremacist group when he was a state legislator in 2002. The group, known as the European American Unity and Rights Organization, or EURO, was founded by former KKK leader David Duke. Scalise says he didn't know the group's origins at the time, only had one staffer then, and said yes to almost anyone who asked him to speak. Quote, "I emphatically oppose the divisive racial and religious views groups like these hold. I am very disappointed that anyone would try to infer otherwise for political gain." Critics say it doesn't pass the smell test, but Boehner says he has his back, saying, quote, "More than a decade ago, Representative Scalise made an error in judgment, and he was right to acknowledge it was wrong and inappropriate. Like many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I know Steve to be a man of high integrity and good character. He has my full confidence as our whip, and he will continue to do great and important work for all Americans." Boehner and Scalise still face criticism from political opponents and calls for an investigation from the Congressional Black Caucus. Meanwhile, New York's governor will need to decide whether to hold a special election to fill Grimm's seat or let it sit vacant until November. Ed?
Rick Leventhal in New York City. Thanks, Rick. Now to this Fox News alert. Right now in the Java Sea, a massive recovery operation has just begun this hour. Officials are extracting bodies and debris from the Airasia Flight 8501, which vanished on a short trip from Indonesia to Singapore on Sunday. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has that story from London tonight.
A breakthrough in the search for Airasia Flight 8501. Debris from the plane has been found floating on the surface of the Java Sea. The items include a blue suitcase, an oxygen tank, as well as at least 3 bodies of those on board, carried away in body bags, prompting the announcement of a huge and urgent search effort starting at dawn Wednesday, Indonesia time.
I asked to do a massive search to look for the plane and passengers, as well as the crew. I have instructed them to focus on evacuating passengers and crew.
The discovery was made some 100 miles southwest of the Indonesian island of Borneo, not far from where the plane lost contact with flight control after taking off and encountering bad weather Sunday. The Java Sea at that location is relatively shallow, about 80 feet in depth. There are reports the fuselage of the plane was spotted on the sea floor.
They're recovering wreckage now, so the task is clearly going to be accomplished, I suspect, relatively quickly.
Still, there are challenges for the Indonesian authorities, along with other countries providing assistance. The U.S. has sent the destroyer USS Sampson, which boasts helicopters, recovery gear, and sonar equipment. A surveillance aircraft is also being sent, and other assets are available. Anything to hasten the harrowing wait for the families of the 162 on board, who will soon have to do the grim task of identifying their loved ones. After the botched handling of families in the aftermath of the Malaysia Air disappearance earlier this year, Airasia wants to get it right.
It is the worst feeling one could have, but we stay strong for the families out there to ensure that we can look after them even after this incident.
Among the other assets the U.S. is offering Indonesia are what are called pinger locators to help find the black boxes, the data recorders that are installed in the airplane. They could help solve the mystery of this crash and maybe help ensure the safety of future air travelers. Ed.
Greg Palcott live for us tonight in London. Thank you, Greg. Up next, new Obamacare enrollment figures are incomplete. Could this be another sign of trouble in 2015? But first, here's what some of our Fox affiliates all around the country are covering tonight. Our affiliate KHQ is covering a tragic story at a northern Idaho Walmart. A woman in her late 20s is dead. Some reports say her 2-year-old son accidentally killed her after reaching into her purse where a concealed gun was fired. Authorities are still trying to confirm the relationship. KTXL in Sacramento is covering the 16 state firefighters placed on paid leave for unrelated policy violations that grew out of an investigation into allegations that firefighters were having sex on fire trucks. Formal results, presumably results of the investigation, of course, are expected early next month. And here's a live look from KMSP in Fridley, Minnesota. They're on the scene of a hostage situation going on right now with a barricaded gunman. It's been going on since 1 p.m. local time. No word yet on how many hostages are in the home or the motive. It's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back with a lot more news.